Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as of yesterday, Sunday, uh, July 9th of 2017, we see that the New York Post put out a damning cover of current Manhattan mayor, like to think of himself as a governor, Bill de Blasio, a man who is essentially a communist, a man who represents the core constituency of the modern American left, something that keeps coming to the surface time and again. We know that he's taken stances that are diametrically opposed to what the average American citizen is all about. We know that he has essentially assumed a position that is diametrically opposed to the traditions, institutions, and values of these United States of America. And we know that he ran to the G20 summit that was held in Hamburg, Germany. Now, this is not the first time that the left has gone out of their mind with respect to the G20 summit. The G20 summit is basically the 20 most powerful economic powerhouses, for lack of a better term, of nations in existence. And we recall that back in the 90s, when it was held in Seattle, Washington, the anarcho-communists, for lack of a better term, had done everything in their power to create as much chaos and trouble as they could, just being destructive for the sake of being destructive. And that's part of what the left has always been, part and parcel of what they stand for. They've never been creative. They've never stood for anything other than destroying what currently exists to try and create this workers' utopia, this workers' paradise. That's the Marxist drivel that they have been clinging to since the time of the 1840s. And it's ridiculous. Anywhere and everywhere that it has been attempted on the face of God's green earth, communism has been an abject, unadulterated failure. It's because it doesn't take into account human nature or the human condition. But basically what these anarcho-communists are all about is destroying society and civilization as we know it because they view it as something that is intrinsically and inherently unfair, something that seeks to exploit the average worker. You know, it's always class warfare. It's always divide and conquer. It is always class envy and class warfare that drives the ideological underpinnings of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. And make no mistake about it, that is exactly what these people are. They are Fabians. Their goal is to forcefully transform Western culture and civilization into that Fabian socialist leftist dystopia that's torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. And come hell or high water, that's exactly what they do. That is always what they preach. That is always what they attempt to foist down the throats of free, liberty-loving people in all four corners of the globe. Look at the way that the Cultural Revolution worked in communist China under Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao. It was all about eradicating China's illustrious history. It was about erasing anything that could be brought up as a halcyon era, meaning the best days, the brightest days, the most fruitful days of their history, that could challenge communist dominance and authority. Because when you stop and think about it, Under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, communism always brings about shared and increased misery. That's its end goal. That's what it does. The party elites, those who have carved out a special niche for themselves, they are protected. Their wealth is allowed to expand at the expense of the general population, whom they don't view as popular sovereigns. Rather, they view them as peons, or as the Soviet premier in Joseph Stalin viewed them as, useful idiots. People that would be stripped of their individual human decency and dignity and identity and turned into cogs of the machine. The dictatorship of the proletariat. That is what the left has always dedicated itself to. And it hasn't changed. So, what exactly was it that was going on in Hamburg, Germany, that had all of these protesters coming forth, making fools of themselves, creating a public nuisance of themselves? It's because they loathe and despise the ability of people to be able to think and to act and to create of their own fruition. They want the government to supplant everything. They see the government as an end-all, be-all solution for the cornucopia and plethora of problems that are that are encountered the world over. That's what they do. It has been their modus operandi for generation after successive generation now, and they are not about to quit. Irrespective of the fact that it has failed each and every time that it has ever been tried throughout the course of human events, they always allow themselves to fall into these delusions of grandeur in which they think, it's just the wrong people attempting it. It hasn't been propagated by the proper people, and therefore it hasn't been successful. But if we just try it again, pull ourselves back up, dust ourselves off, and just try again, somehow, magically, the resultant outcome will be different. Folks, that is the clinical definition of insanity. And that is what the left has to offer. It is sheer, unadulterated insanity. But what they're very good at is embracing a propagandist narrative and agenda in which they make anyone else appear to be out of touch with reality. They try and claim that we're the radicals. They try and say that those of us who stand for tradition, who stand for the tried and true and well-established methodology of governance, of liberty, of human decency and dignity, we're the crazy ones. Now, I've always thought it's funny that the Communist Manifesto and the Marxist dialectic always tries to say that they're trying to fight feudalism, that capitalism is just a new age form of exploitation of feudalism. But if we go back to that great French philosopher, historian, and admirer of America in her halcyon days, Alexis de Tocqueville, we know that he says that anyone that supports any form or facet of socialism, and yes, communism is an extreme form of socialism, it's the end result of socialism anywhere and everywhere that it's attempted. He said that they are the ones pushing for a quote-unquote soft form of despotism, that they are neo-feudalist or new age feudalists. And recall that feudalism is that static caste system that traces its origins back to the medieval or the Middle Ages, the medieval period, in which there were the workers, the landless peasants who had no rights, the landed elite and gentry who were bound to their king, who was the ultimate leader, ordained by God to rule. That was sovereignty in it. And then there was the church that was separate and apart from everything. They even had their own ecclesiastical courts, and that led to disputes. In fact, One of the practices was that monarchs would give huge swaths of territory to the church to ensure that they were indulged to go to heaven. In fact, this was known as an indulgency. That was par for the course within the medieval church. And that was pre-Reformation era. So that is when the Catholic Church was a dominant force. It was the only church, really, in Western culture and civilization because of the dominance of the Roman Empire. And then when Rome fell, the only vestige of the empire that remained aloft and viable, as well as functioning in Europe, was the Catholic Church. So that attribute of it was there. Now it's replaced with this communist type of eternal atheism. Atheism as religion, government as a self-proclaimed benevolent benefactor, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. That is what they always come forth with. And it's the same dark, twisted, and reckless ideology that is carried out in repetitive fashion time and again with no room for any type of dissension, any type of disagreement. Because again, they think that they are not properly educated. That's why Stalin and Hitler and all of the other tin-pot dictators and wannabe potentates that have risen throughout the course of human events would call their pogroms and their concentration camps and their gulags and their political prisons as re-education camps. That's what they think. They think that there is something mentally wrong with you. Right down to the way that you were raised, right down to the values, traditions, and institutions that you revere are out of place with normalcy. Of course, that presupposes that communism or socialism or any one of these dingbat leftist ideologies is normal. They are not normal. They disregard human endeavors, human creativity, individual rights to hold and keep property. Some of those natural law tenets, in fact, all of the natural law tenets that underpin this constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic of ours, which, by the way, is the longest standing form of government of its type throughout the course of human events, something that the historical revisionists don't want you to know, something that someone like Bill de Blasio wouldn't want you to know. Because again, it would be contrary to the propagandist narrative and agenda that they are championing and that they are advocating for. Because again, if there is any room for dissension, if there is any room for disagreement for whatever it is that they are trying to foist upon us, then they know that it will be rejected in the free marketplace of ideas because it is simply theft by any other name. And who in their right mind would want to accept a form of thievery? Theft. That is what the left is all about. Their massive redistributive schemes are all about stealing. They try and play it up with fluff words. They try and use vague and ambiguous magic little buzzwords to obfuscate the truth and ultimately to bamboozle the people. They go for the baser instincts of jealousy, gluttony, sloth, basically all of the so-called 7 deadly sins. They utilize that, all while taking on this facetious and intellectually disingenuous air that they are fighting greed, that capitalism is unbridled greed. This is the nonsense that they have spewed and spouted for generation after successive generation now for over the past 150 plus years, ladies and gentlemen. And again, unfortunately, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. But with Bill de Blasio, he decided that he would go and be part of these massive protests in Hamburg, Germany, that caused untold amounts of property damage, untold amounts of threats to violence and destruction, as a showing of solidarity and unity with these most base and vile characteristics that truly have no place in an open and honest society, but above all, a free society like that of these United States of America. You see, that's the type of anarchy and chaos and dissension and intellectual disingenuousness that folks like de Blasio want to bring forth in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. That is what their modus operandi is. And they are truly Machiavellian in that respect. And remember that Machiavellian refers to Niccolo Machiavelli, who his magnum opus, The Prince, back in the Renaissance. And essentially what he said is that the ends justify the means. That's always the way it is with communism. That's always the way it is with these radical, frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist leftists who will stop at nothing to completely and utterly annihilate free-thinking individuals and liberty-loving lands the world over. I wish this wasn't the case. But when we examine the great weight of the evidence under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, that is the one inexorable conclusion that sane, rational, logical, thinking human beings must reach. It's because this is what they do. It is their well-established and repetitive pattern. And they are never going to back down from it. They are never going to change. It just is what drives them. It's what motivates them. It is what has led them to do this time and again to the point of it reaching ad nauseum. And it didn't go unnoticed. I'm looking at a story that was published on The Blaze on July 9th at 5:52 p.m. And it starts with, on Sunday, the New York Post made it very clear how they feel about New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio leaving his city responsibilities to go to Germany for the G20 summit. With a picture of de Blasio smiling, the Post wrote in big, bold-faced letters, Deutsch bag. The headline was a play on the common American insult of D-bag. I don't need to go into that. We all know what that is. But I do want to just pull up this cover for you to see, just because it's amazing. It is truly amazing to see this for what it is, for what it does, for what it encapsulates, because it speaks volumes about who Bill de Blasio is, what Bill de Blasio is representing, and what he's been pushing for time immemorial. And there it is. Deutsch bag. Mayor feeds his ego in Germany after fleeing a city in mourning. Now, isn't that interesting? It speaks to the sort of dissension and unhappiness that is gripping New York City. It speaks to this overall sense of decay, raising crime rates, all of the failings that radical leftist ideology brings about each and every time that it is attempted and implemented. And essentially what this does, ladies and gentlemen, it shows just how radical the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have become. And again, they are not going to back down from this. They are not going to relent with respect to this, because they believe they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that means that their victory is within grasp. And so they're going to become more aggressive. They're going to continue to adhere to the twin cancerous doctrines which we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have declared total war upon, those of political correctness and moral relativism in order to divide and conquer the American people, in order to cram their senseless and wasteful and worthless ideology down our throats and completely against our will. You know, ladies and gentlemen, that's part of the reason why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and even our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, and certainly your humble correspondent here, have reiterated so many times on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program that it is absolutely imperative that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. Because when we do that, we can cut through the malarkey. We can see this for what it is, an attempt to strip and deprive us of our rights. And it allows us to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and to say enough is enough. It allows us essentially to tell these proponents of this out of control leviathan of an administrative state that has no responsibility to the American people to go sit on it and rotate. That they do not have the authority, the power, nor the wherewithal to fundamentally, drastically, and dare I say, irreparably transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. And make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what they are doing. As I sit here, right now, speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. They loathe and despise your ability to think for yourself. They look at everything that these United States of America have ever stood for, going back to our nation's inception some 237 plus years ago. And they just despise it. They hold it with the utmost contempt. They want us to be painted as radicals trying to push for a perfect image of Americana that never really existed. But that's bovine and equine excrement. It has no connotation nor any connection with reality, nor with what true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional composition is. In other words, those of us who want to go back to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution at all levels of government adhere to, advocate, and support. That's the intellectual disingenuousness of the left. And Bill de Blasio has been a part of that. He's been a peddler of that very divisive notion of identity politics, which is just a sub-arm of cultural Marxism. He has pushed for redistributive schemes that have left New York City in shambles. And this is the sort of message that the modern American left has been embracing for generation after successive generation now, and it is only getting worse. They are going to double down on these efforts. They see no reason to moderate themselves. And again, folks, they are Fabian socialists. They take their name from the Roman general Fabian, who defeated the great Carthaginian general Hannibal, not by going in direct battle, but drawing him further and further away from his supply lines so that they could ultimately ensnare him in a flanking pincer maneuver. And that's what they did. It's incremental attacks. It's guerrilla warfare. And this is political guerrilla warfare. That is what these proponents of radical left-wing thought and ideology engage in. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future because they have no desire to back down. They are hell-bent on utterly annihilating all that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And that has always been their modus operandi. And it always will be their modus operandi. But I think it's so interesting that the New York Post took this stance. And, of course, those lines, the mayor feeds his ego in Germany after fleeing a city in mourning. Again, that is all a reflection upon exactly what de Blasio's legacy has meant for New York City. He has stripped it of all of the characteristics that would have ever have made that city a shining example of what pure Americana ought to be. And they're always part of the Blame America First crowd. Like Obama, who during his first term had that apology tour across the world in which he denigrated our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity on an international stage. Something that the left wouldn't have dared to do 25 to 30 years ago. But that's where we are now. That has been their incessant driving force for generation after successive generation, and they're getting more and more rabid. They can hardly contain the hatred that they feel for these United States of America, both as a nation and people. They think that we got to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on the face of God's green earth by chicanery, by theft, by deplorable acts and deeds. Now, is that true? No. That is the revisionist history that they have been using to brainwash and indoctrinate the up-and-coming generations in these United States for generations. They want us to forget our history. They want to forget, they want us to forget what it is that has propelled us to such lofty heights in our brief yet glorious history. And that is why we must always be vigilant. That is why we must always take the time to learn the true history of these United States of America, because then and only then can we truly hope to place this nation back onto the path to recovery, back onto the path to a renewed American prosperity. You see, that's what they don't want. That is what they are fighting tooth and nail to prevent. And again, they're not going to back down from that. To them, this is the perfect opportunity to keep pushing that tried and true, albeit threadbare tactic and strategy of divide and conquer. And that's what they do. They pit American citizen against American citizen in the hopes that we tear out each other's jugular, so that we are distracting one another and bleeding this nation to the point of anemia. When we become docile, the whole notion of Cloward and Piven comes rushing straight back to the epicenter of it all. And if you recall, Cloward and Piven were those two egghead academicians from Columbia University back in the 1950s and 60s who wanted to create a permanent entitlement system which had already been established via the New Deal, by overwhelming what existed, and to have it work in conjunction with this out-of-control leviathan of an administrative state that has no accountability to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people, so that the people would then come to the government on bended knee and beg them to satiate or repair or fix this problem that government initiated and built in the first place. You see, that's the intellectual disingenuousness that forms the cornerstone or the linchpin of this entire frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist ideology and movement that has been a stain on American history for the past 150 plus years, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they do. It's what they embrace. That is their modus operandi. That is their driving force and characteristic. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future because they believe they see a light at the end of the tunnel, which means that their victory is within grasp. The article at the Blaze goes on to say that de Blasio was heavily criticized over the weekend and late last week after he abruptly left New York City to attend G20 summit activities, including many of the anti-capitalist protests that eventually devolved into riots. And there is something to be said about that. He is essentially giving these anarcho-communists a modicum of credibility, a sliver of credibility. Here is a sitting mayor in one of the largest cities, if not the largest city in these United States of America, what is known as the Empire State. That's what I love because it's about capitalism, it's about Wall Street, it's about the free markets, and yet that's what he is going and denigrating. It's what he's attempting to tear down. That is the sort of chicanery that is the sheer embodiment and epitome of what the left stands for in this fast-paced modern society in which we live today. So it's not about human decency. It's not about individual character. It's not about self-accountability and self-responsibility, those two fundamental pillars of American culture and civilization and society, working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. No, it's about being dependent upon some sort of workers' paradise in which the government is some sort of a benevolent benefactor that is the end-all, be-all solution for the cornucopia and plethora of problems that we face both as a nation and people. That is the drivel that the left always embraces. And if you ever notice, the left is always against big industry, big oil, big pharmaceutical, big cosmetic, big auto, big whatever. But boy, do they love big government. And yes, they attempt to use that dark and twisted game of semantics that we have been warning you about here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, where they try and hide it. And again, it directly coincides to what that great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs attempted to warn America about in his magnum opus of Keynes at Harvard back in the 1950s and 60s. Again, all of that coincides with the so-called countercultural revolution, which is a fertile breeding ground for this sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftism, which is exactly what these so-called protesters at the G20 summit were engaging in. Anti-capitalist activities. Basically trying to take away the ability for you to use your skills, your natural God-given talents to embetter yourself away from you. Because in their mind, true equality doesn't mean equal opportunity, it means equal outcome. And when it is driven by a so-called equal outcome, it means redistributive schemes, it means theft, it means depravity, it means deplorability. That is the entire hallmark of what their movement is based upon. It is their modus operandi. It is what drives them at every waking hour. And we see it time and again. And the only way that we can stop them is to marginalize them, is to form an incremental plan of our own, to meet them head on. but in a guerrilla style. Let's draw them out. Let's say that anyone who tries to go against the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is known in the common American vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than our Constitution itself. They need to be re-educated. They are the insane radicals. Look, they even entitled their frothing at the mouth Fabian Socialist Leftist Bible by that jerk, Saul Alinsky, as Rules for Radicals. And remember, he dedicated that book to Lucifer, Satan. That is what they believe in. That is what drives them. That is what motivates them. And none of it lines up with all that we hold near and dear, both as a nation and people. It is this sort of drivel that will threaten to tear us down and tear us asunder from within. And that is what they have been working towards all this time. So why did de Blasio do it? I think the New York Post is onto something when they sit there and say that he was essentially attempting to stroke his ego. That's what it's coming down to. And isn't that what all of these tin pot dictators do? Don't they always create a cult of personality around themselves? They're like rock stars. They're superstars. They know better than you. At least that is the air they give off. That is the persona that they want to project, or the image that they wish to project to bamboozle the people so that we willingly surrender our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights to them. Because after all, don't they know better than we do? Don't they have a clearer picture, an understanding of exactly what it is that is going on in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's nonsense, ladies and gentlemen. But that is the political kabuki theater that we encounter on a daily basis in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And it is not about to get any better anytime soon. The mayor left the city at a time, according to the Blaze, when it was mourning the loss of a New York Police Department patrol officer who had been assassinated as she sat in her patrol car in the Bronx just one day prior. De Blasio also opted to skip the swearing-in ceremony for a new class of NYPD officers by traveling to Germany. Now remember, there was already a heated and contentious relationship between the mayor and the New York City Police Department. It went back to those Black Lives Matters domestic terrorist organization who all throughout the summer of 2016 engaged in these wanton, heinous acts of murder, of depravity, of violence against police officers in this country, simply for the fact that these people don the uniform of their respective communities and put their lives on the line each and every day to secure their respective communities. This sort of chicanery truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all, free society like that of these United States of America. And the fact that these left-wing dingbats sit there and grow more radical with each passing successive day tells us all that we need to know about what motivates them. It is hatred, chicanery, sheer unadulterated nonsense. The left always does that. The left will never back down from that. And here's the interesting thing. In response, New Yorkers scorched de Blasio for leaving, as they should. What in the hell is a mayor of a city going overseas to a foreign jurisdiction to give support for things that are quintessentially anti-American? That sort of thing would have gotten politicians like that chased out of office with torches and pitchforks. And you see, that's part of the problem that we're encountering in this modern system of American polity. Accountability has been all but swept aside, cast by the wayside. We've allowed our political system to essentially devolve into a mere spectator sporting event where it's rah-rah, shish-kumbah. As long as it's our guy, it doesn't matter how deplorable they act. It doesn't matter whether they stand against the true hopes, dreams, and dare I say, future aspirations of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. No. As long as it's our boy or our gal, they're golden. We buy into the cult of personality. We buy into the chicanery and the political kabuki theater at its absolute worst. And this is the end result. The end result is that it is always diametrically opposed to the American people, to what we value. And these people act with such hubris and arrogance that it is disgusting. It is palpable. The contempt with which they hold America in, both as a nation and people. The only way that it's going to stop is that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, put our foot down and say enough is enough. We will not tolerate this anymore, that we will not accept this anymore, we will not stand for this. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave, for God's sake. But unfortunately, that isn't what goes on. We know that New York State Assemblywoman, according to the Blaze, Nicole Malliotakis, who is a Republican, likely to be challenging de Blasio for his job later this year, blasted him for leaving the city for Germany. Good for her. But there needs to be another impetus, another driving force behind all of this that needs to be front and center, and that is we've got to get back to the Constitution. We have got to get back to restrained government. We have got to get back to those things that could be dubbed as quintessential Americana. You see, for far too long now, we have ignored that. We have allowed politicians on either side of the political aisle to spin this narrative in any way that they see fit that literally pits American citizen against American citizen in the hopes of bamboozling us and leaving us in a weakened position through the tried and true, albeit threadbare tactics and strategies of divide and conquer. You see, that's what de Blasio's all about. Look at how divided New York City is right now. Look at the violence that is being perpetrated against New York City police officers merely for the fact that they serve their community in a certain respect or fashion. And again, all of this is rooted in that subsect of cultural Marxism of identity politics. That is why the left embraces it. You see, they want to foment as much dissension and chaos as is humanly practicable and possible so that we are always in a heightened sense of hatred, animosity, malice. That is not the way of the United States. And again, I'm reminded of how the father of our nation, George Washington, so eloquently put it in his farewell address of 1796, when he implored the American people not to allow themselves to be broken down into disparate and competing factions because we would lose sight of the overarching picture, that which is truly important to us, that which nourishes us and nurtures us both as a nation and people, and that is our shared United States Constitution. Folks, the Constitution is so much more than merely being the supreme law of the land. It is the contractual agreement that exists between the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, and the government. And whenever the government or actors or agents or officers within the government at any level of government tries to embrace ideologies which are diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution, they are acting in a way that is detrimental to all of us. It is spiteful, it is hateful, it is destructive, it is divisive, and it has no place in an open, honest, but above all, free society like that of these United States of America. And there really is no way around that. But de Blasio is going to sit there and attempt to sugarcoat it and state that, look, what I'm really doing is just looking out for the little guy, that we have systemic racism, that we have systemic bigotry, that we have all of this crap and nonsense that the left has been peddling for generation after successive generation now. And the only way to combat this is to show solidarity with these forces that are diametrically opposed to all that we hold near and dear here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Why is it that that is always the platform and lexicon and diatribe that these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists attempt to cram down our throats? It's because it is a false propagandist narrative and agenda, and they think that it works. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are, if nothing else, meticulous. They are patient. They will work at this drip by drip, step by step, increment by increment, until they finally achieve their overarching goal of transforming this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. Now, I know that that may sound repetitive. I know that we have repeated it on previous episodes here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, and indeed throughout the course of today's Solo Flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. But I repeat it because it is so important and is so on point with what is going on. With this sort of chicanery that is coming to dominate the news cycle time and again. De Blasio put aside his duties, his obligations and his responsibilities to his constituency to try and run forth and say, gee, look how great communism is. That shows you just how out of touch with reality these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists truly are. Their vision does not coincide with the best interests of the American citizenry or electorate. But now, of course, they'll claim that it does. They will always double down on these efforts to claim that they are for the little guy. That is part of the intellectual disingenuousness that has been driving their movement for well over a century and a half now, ladies and gentlemen. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. They will just continue to abide by that, continue to propel themselves with that, because that is how they get their political sustenance. And isn't it disgusting what they do? The way that they just are derelict in their duties, go after all that we hold near and dear in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and all for their own ego, all for pushing this agenda, which Alexis de Tocqueville so rightly pointed out was nothing more than New Age feudalism. They want you to be dependent upon the government. They want you to be dependent upon them. But they take this holier-than-thou attitude of do as I say, not as I do. It's that kind of snobbery and elitism that has driven the left for generation after successive generation now, and it is only getting worse. They think that that is a fundamental way of governing. They will turn this into a system of governance, while all the while assuming a position that is seemingly, upon a mere cursory glance, diametrically opposed to the positions that they have actually adopted upon themselves. But it is intellectually disingenuous. It is not what they are really doing. And that is why it's important that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God given rights, because that empowers us to cut through all of this malarkey, to see the truth, to take the stance that is necessary to bring this nation back from the brink of ruin. Again, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist, leftist, Marxist, whatever, any of the ideologies, factions, or philosophies on the left, their end game is ultimately collectivization. Their overarching goal is to strip you of your individual dignity, your individual property, and your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That is what drives and motivates them and has done so for over a century and a half. And so when de Blasio was going to Germany for this G20 summit, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity with these anarcho-communists, he was essentially giving a huge middle finger to America. In a sense, what he was saying was, screw you, America, screw you, my electorate, screw you, the New York City Police Department, you don't matter. These unbathed, unwashed, new age hippies that want to create some sort of workers' paradise, even though it has never come to fruition, it has never been successfully implemented since Marx and Engels created that decrepit, derelict ideology, if it can even be called that. Well, it's just because the wrong people have tried to put it in place. Again, their delusions of grandeur bubble up to the surface, to the epicenter. It's what drives them. It's what motivates them. It's what pushes them. It's what they always do. Well, enough is enough. It is high time that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, say no. Such a powerful, simple, yet oft-times overlooked word in the English vernacular that is almost universally understood the world round, no. You know what they should have done for this wannabe potentate Bill de Blasio? Should have refused his re-entry into the United States. But any way you slice it, what he has done is he has essentially thumbed his nose at the New York electorate. He has turned his back on his own police department yet again, because this is certainly not the first time that he has engaged in such chicanery. This kind of malarkey is highly destabilizing. It's highly destructive. And it shows that he is destitute of morality. And remember what that sagacious founding father, Sam Adams, said, that in order for the United States to be a strong, vibrant, and dare I say, robust republic, the people have to be a virtuous people. And that means that they have to be led by a virtuous leadership as well. The reason that we have elections is that we, in our capacity as popular sovereigns, are delegating certain authority to these figureheads that are supposed to represent us in our government. That means that we have to vet them. That means that they, too, must be people of virtue, meaning that they live and adhere by a high standard of morality, a code of ethics, if you will. But these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists do not live by a code of morality. They do not believe, they do not believe in something that is always right and oppose that which is always wrong because they believe in situational morality. That is the dark and twisted reality of moral relativism. And that is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have embraced for generation after successive generation now. And Bill de Blasio is just personifying it in avant-garde fashion, in sheer unadulterated ugliness. And it just isn't stopping. What Nicole Maliatakis said is, quote, unbelievable. Instead of jet setting around the world, he should be here doing his job. A police officer was murdered. Street homelessness has skyrocketed and people continue to get delayed on the trains. Well, that is always what socialism brings about. It is a failed system. It is a decrepit system. It is a system that doesn't give a damn about the people because, as Alexis de Tocqueville so rightly pointed out, and as I pointed out earlier in today's Solo Flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program, it is New Age feudalism. We are merely a means to an end. We are to be used as useful idiots, to be leapfrogged over so that they can secure their clutches on the reins of political power here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave to push forth their narrative and agenda come hell or high water. That is what they are all about. That has been their modus operandi for well over a century and a half now. And of course, de Blasio is going to sit there and do this because he sees it as a way to maybe transition from citywide office to maybe statewide or even federal office, so that he can become the next new age leftist who spews all of this unadulterated nonsense that is anti-American at its heart, at its core, and at its base. Because this is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists believe in their heart of hearts. It is the end result of their chicanery each and every time. And we have to awaken to it. We have to stand up to it because no one else is going to do it. You see, by the very inherent design of this, our beloved representative republic, our founding fathers expected us in our capacity as United States citizens to put an end to it, to be proactive and to be vigilant with respect to our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. You see, people like de Blasio want us to believe that the government is this end-all, be-all solution for all the problems, that it's this benevolent benefactor that provided us with our rights. That's what Noid-Face Boing Me Sanders had done. And to think that in the 2016 presidential election cycle, the Democrats could even put forth a man who was a self-avowed so-called democratic socialist. It doesn't matter. Socialism is frickin' socialism. It is all against the well-established norms and principles and mores of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Left always convince people by reaching to their base instincts, their hatred and animosity, their petty jealousies, to believe that they will provide for them. They will promise them pie in the sky and the moon itself. But ladies and gentlemen, if it sounds too good to be true, 9 times out of 10, it is. That is what de Blasio and all of these leftist ideologues are about. They embrace this each and every time. They continue to march forward with it as though it is some new idea. But no matter how much makeup or lipstick you put on a pig, it is still an oinker. It is still a pig. And de Blasio is a pig for going to Germany, particularly given the circumstances and the situation that was on the ground in the place that he is the elected representative over. Why? Why would you do that unless you loathe and despise your very constituency, the very people who put you in office? Now, to the people of New York City, Manhattan, I have to ask, are you happy with this? Does this give that infamous New York pride some sort of a boost? Oh yeah, we sat here and we elected this guy, and he goes to the G20 summit there in Germany and sits there and gives support to anti-capitalists, but I can't make a living here. My taxes are going up, homelessness is on the rise, and crime is skyrocketing exponentially. Well, this is what happens when you don't vet your candidates. This is what happens when you buy into the lies of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. It will come back to haunt you and to bite you each and every time. That is what de Blasio does. That is what de Blasio stands for. That is what the left stands for here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And that's not going to change. Yet somehow we lull ourselves into a false sense of security. But as that other sagacious founding father, Benjamin Franklin, so aptly put it, those who sacrifice essential liberty in order to purchase a little bit of temporary security deserve neither liberty nor security and shall surely have neither. Damn, is that not powerful? Does that not speak volumes about the problems that are being faced not only in New York City, but across this vast land of ours? You see, folks, whenever we divorce and distance ourselves from the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, this sort of chicanery is the end result each and every time. There is no way around that. It is what we face, both as a nation and people. And de Blasio absolutely should be ashamed of himself. De Blasio should have been there for his constituents. For you see, the office, even if it is a mayoral office, is greater than the individual that holds it. That's part of what it means to be a nation of laws and not of men. But we see that each and every time these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists attempt to make it about a cult of personality. And unfortunately, this is beginning to emerge on either side of the political aisle. When we allow our system of polity to devolve into a mere spectator sporting event, we begin to excuse this sort of chicanery. We begin to excuse this sort of nonsense as long as it's our guy or our gal that is engaging in this inexcusable behavior. That is the reason why Sam Adams said that we must be a virtuous people. But for generation after successive generation now, thanks to the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, we have been steadily, incrementally, and incessantly moving away from that. Our country has been sliding ever further to the left. You can see it in pop culture. You can see it in all sorts of things. In fact, we're going to do a program discussing the claims from Scotty Nell Hughes against Fox Business anchor Charles Payne, that he sexually assaulted her. They were both married. They were both engaged in a 3-year sexual extramarital affair and tryst. See, in decades past, that would have been shocking. It would have met ultimate condemnation from the court of public opinion. People would be held accountable. But accountability and responsibility, these things have been cast by the wayside in favor of moral relativism, in favor of this notion of instant gratification, of thinking that there isn't a set standard of morality in which we should live by. And you see the sort of destructive influence that it has on the nation. But not just the nation, the entire body politique of the nation as well. I know that this may sound abstract on the surface or upon a mere cursory glance, but it goes deeper, right to the heart of what issues we are facing, both as a nation and people. And the only way to overcome this, again, to remember that our nation, our Constitution, our Federalist representative republic are all based on those natural law tenets, which by their very nature are immutable, meaning they're just as applicable today as they were at the inception of this nation some 237 plus years ago, as God willing they will be some 237 plus years from today. But again, it requires that we, as United States citizens, be moral, believe in common decency, that we yearn for the greater good. Yes, perfection cannot be achieved in this earthly mortal realm in which we live. But does that mean that we don't try to improve it? Does that mean that we rest on our laurels? Because that's certainly not the attitude that our founding fathers adopted that gave rise to our nation. That's certainly not the way that we will push ourselves to a brighter tomorrow, to a better future. And it's not the way that we will secure our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It always comes back to those two fundamental pillars that have defined the American experience, our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity. Always that of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us, as United States citizens, self-determination. And when you really stop and think about it, in an objective fashion, America always does best when our people are self-determinate. And you see, that's the great hypocrisy of people like Bill de Blasio. He wants to be self-determinate, but he wants to rule with an iron fist over his constituency. Through overzealous and draconian regulations, by trying to create this so-called nonsensical workers' paradise, he is basically working against everything that this nation has ever stood for or ever represented. That is the type of chicanery that has defined the leftist ideology and movement in this nation for generations. And it's disgusting. And again, it does require that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, be proactive and vigilant in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. That is what truly motivates us and inspires us to be greater. But Bill de Blasio and people of his ilk, they are the ones that go forth and try and assume a mantle of being holier than thou, that they know what's best for us all, and that we should just sit back and accept whatever edicts they hand down, come hell or high water. That is the epitome of hypocrisy. That is the intellectually disingenuous narrative that they have been propagating for generation after successive generation now. Well, enough is enough. What is it going to take for the electorate of New York City to finally say, we're sick and tired of putting these left wing windbags, these scumbags, into higher office within our municipality? You know, they really should be asking themselves these types of soul searching questions. They should be prodding themselves to try and get to the truth, because what it comes down to is that they are essentially comfortable with this type of corruption. To steal the phrase that the left has attempted to utilize to bludgeon the right, dating back to 2006, when the Democrats took the majority of the House of Representatives, which they have since lost. The culture of corruption. Well, the largest purveyors, the largest acolytes of this so-called culture of corruption are the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who have assumed that holier-than-thou position of do as I say, but not as I do. Blasio, I'm sure, used New York taxpayer funds to, to fund this little soiree that he took there in Germany to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity with these communists. Because that is what the left always does. That is their modus operandi. That is the way they have operated for generation after successive generation. And it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future because they believe that they are justified. Ah, who are the people to complain? They're the ones that put us here. And in that respect, they might have a point, but it's not a very good point. It just speaks to the vile corruption that rests at the heart of their ideology, the vile corruption that motivates and drives them at each and every waking hour. You see, we can put an end to this. We can do this by fostering a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. We are a self-determinate people. It's just that we have forgotten the amounts of power that we wield. And it is high past time that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, say enough. Or as New York citizens in this case, or as wherever we are citizens of. We are the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And therefore, we, and we alone, shoulder the duty, obligation, but above all, responsibility of holding our elected officials accountable. Question is whether New York will hold Mayor Bill de Blasio accountable for this chicanery that he's been engaged in. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. Why did they put him in office in the first place? There is this sort of hubris that comes out of that city. It's a hubris that cannot be ignored. It's something that they attempt to bludgeon the rest of the nation, attempt to thumb their noses at the rest of the nation. But my heart does go out to the New York City Police Department. We here in Dallas, if you recall, during last summer, almost exactly a year ago, if not a year ago, had that awful shooting by those derelict, deplorable, domestic terrorists in the Black Lives Matters organization, targeting uniformed police officers simply for their avocation. Really? This sort of senseless chicanery, this sort of mindless drivel, this sort of toxicity, for lack of a better term, it must stop. There is a greater good in this country, and we need to recall that the whole of America is far greater than the mere sum of its parts. Now, of course, that is far easier said than done. Given this hyper-partisan atmosphere in which we live today, and given the fact that these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are attempting to destroy us from within, yes, it makes it much more difficult. But the light of truth always has a way of shining through, piercing the web of deceit and bringing us back to a modicum of sanity. But of course, that means that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, are going to have to start standing up for that which truly matters. That we will have to start defending our time-honored values, institutions, and traditions, both as a nation and people, and at all levels of government. And it's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have always stated that the key has been with us since the beginning of our country. The key to unlocking the chains of governmental tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression, is our Constitution. People like Blasio hate, loathe, and despise everything that the Constitution stands for. They sit there and attempt to claim that it's all just about negative rights, and that we need new rights, that we need to accept perversions as the norm, or this nonsensical drivel as the norm. Why do we need to do that? We don't. That's the thing. That's the crux of the matter. That is what they don't want you to realize. Morality is not situational. Moral relativism simply cannot, does not, and has never and never will work. Irrespective of what these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists will try to convince us of, it doesn't work. It does not speak to who we are, either as a nation or a people. But they will do anything to try and convince us of that. They will do anything to force that down our throats. That is why you see these intolerant efforts to whitewash the history of a certain geographical region of this beloved republic of ours. That's why you see Bill de Blasio trying to go hobnob with these anarcho-communists. That is the legacy of the left. That is the deplorable conditions that they would have become a well-established new norm right here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave, and it must be rejected at any and every place that it is encountered. There is no easy path. But as the old adage goes, nothing worth having ever comes easily. We must be resolute in our capacity as United States citizens. We must be the vanguard of liberty, and let us make that vow here today. We, as true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists, in other words, those who wish to return to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution at all levels of government, reject these attempts to embrace an ideology that has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of these United States of America. Bill de Blasio, shame on you. Shame on you for bringing disrepute upon your electorate. Shame on you for being derelict in your duties, obligations, but above all responsibilities in your capacity as an elected representative of the people of New York City. But again, the politicians alone cannot be blamed for being the creatures of habit that they are. The electorate also has to take certain responsibility for enabling and empowering these people to engage in the sort of chicanery that they have, to be this agent provocateur of tyranny, despotism, and oppression. And mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, is that not exactly what Bill de Blasio is? Was this not a shameful act of self aggrandizement on his part at the expense of his constituency? Because that's certainly the notion that I'm left with. That's certainly the impression that has been made on me when examining this entire debacle and fiasco. Do they believe that this type of corruption is cute? Is this cute little corruption that is good for the people of New York City? I don't think so. And as much as I would love to see the people of the Big Apple reject this kind of corruption and chicanery that has dominated their political scene for far too long now, I don't foresee it changing. They have bought in to the notions of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. They view the government as an end-all, be-all solution for everything. They are so ready, willing, and able to sacrifice their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights at the drop of a hat. But when you look at the poetic language that composes our preamble to our shared United States Constitution, you'll see that one of the duties, obligations, and responsibilities that is squarely placed on our shoulders in our capacity as United States citizens is to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and for our posterity, meaning for the up-and-coming generations, and indeed, yes, even those generations which have yet to be born. How do we get back to that? How do we embrace that as a central attribute, as a driving and defining force and characteristic of who we are, both as a nation and people? Well, the way we do that is by fostering that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Bill de Blasio and all of those, this is what happens whenever we distance and divorce ourselves from the natural law tenets contained within the Constitution. This is what happens when we betray our time-honored values, institutions, but above all, traditions. We essentially sacrifice our self-determination because we reject self-accountability and self-responsibility. Why? Because we look to the government as this great benevolent benefactor, the end-all, be-all solution to the cornucopia and plethora of problems that we face both as a nation and people. And the end result each and every time is going to be corruption. It is going to be this sort of deliberate disrespect for the government itself, but above all for the people. You see, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists will make a mockery of our system, of our values, of our morals, time and again. They simply cannot help themselves. It is their driving motivation. It is their modus operandi. And you can see, Bill de Blasio would rather hobnob with anarcho-communists than to stand with his police department. The department that is there to maintain social order within his city, the city that he is elected to represent. No, he doesn't want to do that. That doesn't matter as much as gallivanting around Germany, hobnobbing it up with communists that are engaging in violence and in radical protests in Germany, placing their police department in jeopardy. That's what he would rather do. That is what is true character is. That is the vile, ugly core that is Bill de Blasio. And not just Bill de Blasio, that is the left personified. That encapsulates who they are and what they do. They are violent. They are destructive. They are hateful. They are spiteful. And make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen. This was all to prop up his notion of pushing a redistributive scheme whenever and wherever he can. It was all about stroking his ego, as the New York Post so aptly put it. And I don't usually agree a lot of the times with much of what the New York Post does. You see, decency, morality, those fundamental characteristics of who we are, both as a nation and people, that must be embraced. Once again, if we are to ever place this nation back onto the path to prosperity, that is the only realistic option, the only practicable and real-world solution that is available to us. But fortunately, we have the key to do it. We have the roadmap to do it, and we've had that since the inception of this nation for some 237 plus years now. It's just a matter of us embracing it and fostering that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, and thereby of our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself. You see, that is what is greater than us. That is what we choose to unify around. That is why the old adage that the United States is a nation of laws and not of men holds true. But we see that these leftists, these anarcho-communists, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, they loathe and despise the system of order. They want chaos. They want disruption. They want disunity. They want depravity. That is what they do each and every time. So while New York was there, mourning the loss of an innocent police officer, he was out in Germany promoting the destruction of private property, promoting the destruction of our ideals, standing against everything that we stand for as a nation and people. That is disgusting. That is beyond ill repute. But what will become of it? Inquiring minds would like to know. Well, the way I look at it now, the way things seem now, I don't think anything will come of it. Maybe he will lose. And if that is the case, then yes, we will lift our glasses in support of New York finally making the right decision to toss that bum out of office. But is that going to be the case? Or are we going to see this culture of corruption that has become a quintessential aspect of Manhattan continue in perpetuity? Will they continue to ignore the clear and concise language of our Constitution? Will they continue to advocate for extra-constitutional governmental powers at the expense of the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people? Only time will tell. But their well-established track record and history is not a good one when it comes to that. It's not something that fills me with warm, fuzzy feelings of supreme confidence. But again, maybe, just maybe, they will make the right decision and get rid of this communist windbag that sits in the mayoral office of New York City once and for all, and return to a modicum of sanity in this nation's Big Apple. We shall see. It will be very interesting to see what develops as a direct result of this. Well, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. No, she has not been gallivanting around with anarcho-communists. She's just there to pour you another glass of alcohol. As always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, please feel free to leave them either in the comment section here on our YouTube page, or on our Google Plus page, or even on our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will find the Blogspot account that is just chock full of useful information. And just as you will find in the description section of today's program, you will find a link to the Cafe Press account. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of trinkets, goodies, novelty items, such as hats, shirts, shoes, even pet apparel, drinking glasses, shot glasses, mugs, thermoses, laptop sleeves and protectors, smartphone sleeves and protectors, jewelry, bumper stickers, you name it, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo, or our First Class Passenger logo, or even the two Uplifting America logos, with such a wide array of products, and all at reasonable prices. You simply cannot go wrong with the Cafe Press account. And if you have not already done so, please do subscribe. All subscribers are welcome here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. We do the show for you. We couldn't do the show without you. And it's all about empowering us all so that we can restore American prosperity. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you again next time. Please do take care.